my name is Ken.
And my name is Jason.
And today we're reviewing
Power Grid. So Power Grid is a resource management game focusing on economy, and players take the role of power company tycoons who actually have to compete within a limited space.
So Power Grid, as we know, was actually published in English for a 2004 release, but it actually went through quite a few changes before it became the Power Grid that we know and love now. The first edition of Power Grid was actually known as Funkenschlag. This is also sometimes now referred to as the crayon map version, where essentially you actually used crayons to draw your connections between the different cities. The second edition was actually redone by a game designer called Friedman Fries, and you're probably going to want to remember that name, because you might actually have a game that he's done. This was still called Funkenschlag in Germany, and it actually started shipping with US and German maps. However, this was also the edition that we would now see printed in English in 2004. The second edition also spawned a lot of variant versions of the game, essentially shipping to different areas. So if the game was shipping to France, it would include a France map, or if it was shipping to Japan, it would include, say, a Japanese map. Generally speaking, these maps would be German and one other kind. Power Grid also released a special edition version, which was the ENBW edition. This is a special edition they did in 2007, in part with the Energy Baden-Württemberg power company that was actually from Germany. Power Grid has released a couple little expansions as well. They released a deck of extra power cards, and they've released many board-only expansions of the various alternate maps.
And it's interesting to note that all of the regional maps that were created for the different regional versions of the game, they've been released as expansions. So, they've got quite a few of these out already, and, it really changes the game up because there's a lot of different rules for each one. So that's kind of neat.
Yeah, it's good for keeping the game fresh.
Mm-hmm.
Alright, so now without any further ado, let's get on to Power Grid.
So first we'll go over the components for Power Grid. So this is the main board. It's actually two-sided. This side is the United States, and this side is Germany. These are the 6 sets of player tokens, so each player gets a number of these colorized tokens. This is the money provided with the game. These are the cards that are provided with the game, so these are the power plant cards. And these are the summary cards for players to use. These are the various commodities included with the game. So these are coal, oil, trash, and uranium.
To set up Power Grid, first you have to decide which board side it is you're going to be playing with. And there's actually several other boards in the expansions as well. Jason, you want to go to America or Germany today?
Let's go German, I say.
Yeah, hail to the Germans. Next you want to place the money, the electros, near the board in some accessible location. Next each player is going to choose a color. Jason, because he knows what's good for him, is going to choose red. And I've decided to choose green.
You sure I can't be green?
I'm pretty sure you can't. I'm not sure you know how to be the green player.
Obviously not.
Place the bits for both players next to the board. Both players must then contribute 2 of their power station bits here. 1 each is placed on the scoring track, which tracks the number of cities that each player owns. And 1 each is placed randomly on the turn order track here. So, pick a hand, Jason. This is going to be the leading player to start off with.
Yeah.
That's going to be green. I'm starting leading. Next, starting with the leading player, players take turns selecting regions of the board that they're going to be using. Even in a full player game, you're not actually going to be using all the regions. I select this region to start off with.
And I actually have to choose an adjoining region, otherwise it wouldn't really make sense. So I'm going to choose this region.
Because we're playing a 2-player game, I'm actually only going to be selecting 1 more region, and it has to be adjacent to the ones we've already selected. And I've chosen this region. Now that all the regions have been selected, the easiest way to resolve this is to actually just place an unused color on all the connections that go to the next region over. The pieces that were used to select regions are actually returned back to the players. All players are actually allowed to use the regions that have been selected there. Next, give each player a turn summary card and 50 electros apiece. Next we're going to set up the starting fuel. Coal is actually placed all the way across. Oil is placed from the 3 cost section and onward. Garbage is only actually placed from the 7 and 8 spots to begin with. And uranium is only placed on spaces 14 and 16. Lastly, we're going to sort out the power plants. First, remove power plants 3 all the way up to 10 from the deck. Order your power plants from 3 all the way up to 10. The way this game is supposed to work is that you're supposed to have 4 power plants and then the next 4 power plants underneath it, but we're just putting it lengthwise here because we're running out of space. Next, make sure you removed the Step 3 card and the Power Plant number 13 card from the deck. Take the remainder of the deck, shuffle it well. Because we're playing a 2-player game, you actually are supposed to remove a few cards actually from the game. So in this case, we're actually removing 8 power plants. These power plants are actually removed from the game unseen, so we actually don't know which ones are going to be missing now. Make sure that the power plants, yet again, are shuffled really nicely. Take the Step 3 card and place it at the bottom of the deck. Take power plant number 13, put it on top, and place it all beside the power plants. And now you are ready to play.
So there are 5 phases to a turn in Power Grid. Each player actually completes each phase before moving on to the next phase, so there aren't any specific player turns. The first phase is to determine player order. Second is auction power plants. Third is buy resources. Fourth is build. And fifth is bureaucracy. So to determine player order, you rearrange the player's pieces on the turn order area here. And the person who has the most cities goes first. And if there's any ties, then it's the person with the highest plant number who goes first amongst those tied. And that is actually skipped on the first turn. You just sort of place them randomly at first. Next up is auctioning power plants, and this is one of the parts of the game that new players sometimes find kind of hard. It's kind of a different mechanic. So starting with the leading player, players take turns putting a power plant up for auction from the market. So the leading player would choose one of the power plants in the actual market here, not from the futures market, which is the second row. And then starting with that player, players take turns bidding on the plant up for auction. And each player has to bid at least $1 more than the previous player to stay in the auction. And at the end of the auction, the player with the highest bid, after all others have passed, pays that amount and takes the power plant. It should be noted that once you have passed in an auction, you are no longer allowed to bid on the auction. Now, if the player who actually put the plant up for auction does not win the bid, then they choose the next plant up for bid. If, however, they did get the plant, then the next player in the turn order, who does not have a power plant, chooses the next power plant for auction. Or they may choose to pass in bidding. After each plant is auctioned, then you actually would replenish it from the deck, and you rearrange the power plants so that, again, the highest 4 are in the futures market and the lowest 4 are in the actual market. Once all players have at least 1 power plant or have passed on bidding, and they can't pass on the first turn, then you change the player order again. So the next phase is buy resources. So in player order, and that's starting with the trailing player this time, so the person at the end of the turn order chart, each player takes turns purchasing resources for their listed prices. So each of these little boxes of resources on the board here actually do have costs listed, so everything in this box costs 1, over here costs 2, etc. So prices are actually going to go up as the resources are depleted. Once purchased, these resources must be placed on a power plant. Each power plant can actually store up to twice the resources it uses. So for example, the number 6 power plant uses 1 garbage, so it can actually store 2 garbage. After each player has had an opportunity to buy resources, then each player has an opportunity to build power stations. And this again starts with the trailing player, so it starts from the end of the turn order and works backwards. Players, when it is their turn, may build as many power plants as they are able to, and they can actually choose not to build if they want to, although it's usually a good idea. Now each city is separated into 3 spots. There is a 10, $15, and $20 spot. So generally, players are going to first build into the 10 spot, and that is the only one that is available at the start of the game. Eventually, additional players are going to be able to build in each city, and they will have to pay a little bit more, depending on how many players are already there. And it should also be noted that no player at any point may have more than one power station in a city. Now on the first turn, the first power station that a player builds, they can build anywhere that is in any of the available regions. After they have built their first power station, however, they have to pay the connection fee and the fee for building in a city to build into a city. So for example, if I have a power station in Dortmund and I want to build into Münster, I have to pay the connection fee, which is 2, and the actual city fee, which is 10. So I have to pay a total of 12 to build a power station here. In addition, there are a few free connections at various places on the board. There's usually only 2 or 3 per board. And an example is here between Essen and Duisburg. So in that case, you don't have to pay a connection fee because there isn't one. And the final phase of the turn is the bureaucracy phase. So starting with the leading player, and this is one of the phases that actually goes in turn order, players declare how many power stations they are actually firing. They have to then spend the fuel to fire their plants. So again, using plant 6 as an example, you would have to use 1 garbage from the plant to actually fire it. And it actually indicates how many cities are powered by that plant. So in the case of number 6, that's 1 city. You then receive money for the number of cities that have been fired. However, you can only get up to the maximum of the number of cities you have. So if you, for example, fired plants that actually serviced 4 cities, but you only had 3 power stations on the map, you would only earn money for 3. The extra one would be wasted. After players have received their money, then resources are replenished on the resource track according to the step that you're in and the map that you're using, number of players. There's actually a chart for each map, so you'll have to consult that. And if there are not enough resources to replenish all that is required, then you only replenish as much as is available. So there's just a shortage in that particular resource. You then take the highest power plant on the board, you place it underneath the deck, and again you would replenish. And in addition, if nobody bought any power plants during this phase, you remove the lowest power plant from the game entirely and replenish.
Alright, now that Jason has explained to you the phases of the game, we're actually going to go through steps. So there are actually 3 steps throughout this game. The first step is simply the start of the game. This is basically the rules you already understand, and everything that's in play is in play. This doesn't change until you hit the second step. The second step starts when a player has built their 10th, 7th, or 6th city in a 2, 3 to 5, or 6-player game, respectively. Step 2 can only actually occur during the build phase. Once everybody has officially started Step 2, you can actually build into the 15 slots in the city, not just the 10s. However, since Step 2 can only occur during the build phase, it actually only affects everybody the next build phase. So if one player achieves Step 2 status in the build phase, no one is actually able to build into the 15 spots until the next phase that you're going to be able to build into. Once any player has approached Step 2, Step 2 starts to come into play in the bureaucracy phase of that round. Once you've reached Step 2, the lowest numbered plant is actually removed from the game, and a new plant is drawn to replenish it. Finally, there's Step 3. Now, it is technically possible that Step 3 could occur before Step 2 does. It's incredibly unlikely, though. When the Step 3 card is drawn in order to replenish a power plant, you actually just place it into the market here like you would a normal power plant. You then remove the lowest numbered power plant from the game. Then you break down the wall between future and actual market. All the plants currently in the market are now available for purchase. Once you're in Step 3, again, everybody can actually start building into the 20 cost slots in each city, but again, starting in the next build phase, not if it happens during the current build phase. I'm going to explain the market a little bit more now. So there's 2 spots in the market. The lowest 4 numbered power plants available are actually considered to be the actual market. And the highest 4 numbered power plants are actually considered to be the futures market. The actual market are all power plants that can actually be put up for auction by any player during the auction phase. However, the future ones can only actually be auctioned once they've reached the actual market. When a power plant is purchased, a power plant is drawn to replenish it, and then all other power plants are actually moved up in order to actually order it appropriately. So essentially, at this point, 13 goes at the very end here, and everything else is pushed up one spot. The auction phase actually has a lot of strange strategy about it, because you actually, just because you're the first person up for auction doesn't mean you want to be the first person that takes a power plant. You might actually put a power plant up for auction that you don't even want, just as some other person will take it, just so you can start pushing things up into the actual market from the futures market. So a lot of strategy that goes on here that new players often have a lot of trouble with. However, the difference between the future market and the actual market is only in steps 1 and 2. As I mentioned in the previous spot here, in step 3, the futures market is actually gone, but there's only 6 plants in play. All plants can then be put up for auction. And usually the ones that would normally have been in the futures market are usually really good, and the ones you want to get at this point anyway. Next, we're going to explain a mechanic called the minimum rule. This is nice and simple. If at any point there's a power plant in the market that is actually less than the leading player's score, it is actually immediately removed from game. So let's say an example, somehow me and Jason got all the way up to this point here, and we still have these power plants in play. Because I am the leading player in this example, all plants that were 5 or less should have actually been removed. So these plants actually would be removed from the game and replenished as normal. Because of this, the Step 3 card can actually be revealed in multiple different phases of the game. Usually during the auction phase, but often during the build phase as well. If the minimum rule results in Step 3 appearing in the build phase instead of the auction phase, you actually follow through with Step 3 as you were. So again, you would put the Step 3 phase card into play, and you would remove the lowest power plant from the game, resulting in 6 power plants and drawing no replacements. Finally, how do you end the game? Alright, when the 21st, 17th, 15th, or 14th city is built in a 2, 3 to 4, 5, or 6 player game, respectively, the game is over at the end of the bureaucracy phase at the end of this round. The player that can actually fire the most cities, not just owns the most, is actually the player that wins. If there's a tie, you then can compare money. In this case, obviously, the most wins. And finally, if there's still a tie, compare the number of cities owned, not just fired. And, well, if there's still a tie after that, I guess all tied players win. Good luck. Have fun. So because I was arbitrarily declared the starting player of this game, I get to actually take the first phase. So again, we skip the determined turn order phase at the beginning of the game, and we go right on to the auction power plants phase. So because I'm the leading player, I actually get to choose the first power plant that goes up for auction. Alright, Jason, I'm going to bid 5 on 5.
I will bid 6. Alright.
At this point, I don't really want to get in too much of a bidding war with Jason, because, well, quite frankly, as soon as that one gets moved, someone from the futures market is going to get bumped up to replace it. And generally that's going to be a little better for me. Since I did not actually get a power plant in that auction there, I get to actually choose the next power plant that goes up for auction. I'm going to choose 7. Since I have no one to contest me, I get it for 7. The power plants are then rearranged, and a new one is drawn to replenish. Next we go on to the buy raw materials step. So, because Jason is the trailing player right now, he actually gets to choose raw materials first. So, take a crack at it, Jay.
Alright, well, because I have a higher plant, I can use either coal or oil. So usually you want to go with whatever's cheapest. In this case, because coal is really cheap right now, I think I should, capitalize on that. And I'm going to buy 4, which is twice the capacity of the plant, so I can actually store that. So the first 3 are going to cost me 1. And the next one, because it's in the 2 box, is going to cost me 2, for a total of 5.
Alright, so Jason takes his 5 coal, and change. I've sort of put myself into a predicament in this case, because I can actually, I can fire 2 plants for 3 oil, but oil's actually kind of pricey. I could do what Jason just did there and actually buy up a whole lot of the resources, but this means I'm probably going to put myself into a little bit of a boxed canyon soon enough. So it's probably in my best interest right now just to buy what I'm going to use. So I'm going to buy all 3 of these oils that cost 3. I'm going to get $1 back in change. Next we get the building step. So the trailing player chooses first, so Jason, you're first up to choosing buildings.
So in this case, I can actually only power 1 plant, so I could potentially build more if I wanted to, but in this case, it probably doesn't benefit me because I won't get any extra money from that, and I'm going to be, using money to build. So I'm only going to build 1 plant this turn because it's the first turn. I can build anywhere, however, and I'm going to start by building in Essen for $10. And I chose that because there's a lot of low-cost connections there, and plus there's the free connection to Duisburg, which I have by default now because Ken is, going to have to build through several cities to get there.
Mm-hmm. I am also eyeballing the section that Jason just took there. I'm actually going to start by building in Dusseldorf. That's going to cost me 10. It's then going to cost me 2 for the connection fee, free for the connection fee, and then 10 to get into Dusselburg. That's going to be another 12. I cannot see any other locations I'd be able to get to from this point, so I'm actually going to stop there. So now that we're done the building phase, we go on to the bureaucracy phase. So first off in the bureaucracy step, from the leading player down to the trailing player, everybody declares how many power plants they're going to fire and they get money for that. I'm going to spend my 3 oil to fire 2 power plants. That's going to give me a total of $33. Now Jason gets to fire his power plants.
I'm going to use 2 of the coal, which I have on that plant. And that is going to let me fire 1 power station, which gets me $22.
At the end of the bureaucracy phase, we remove the highest cost power plant that's currently in the market. We put it under the deck and replace it as normal. So 26 actually goes on the far end here. Next, we replenish the available resources. So because we're playing a 2-player game and we're still in step 1, that means we're going to be replenishing 3 coal, 2 oil, 1 garbage, and 1 uranium. Because there are only 2 coal available, that is all that gets replenished. So there's actually more coal that could potentially have gone out there, but we don't actually have enough coal to replace it. Materials are starting to get scarce now. We now keep on going from there. So as you can see, we're quite a few more turns ahead here. I've actually taken the lead in cities over Jason, but Jason's actually in a much better opportunity to fire plants than I am, based on his performance in the last few rounds, so this is going to be a very interesting game coming soon. So we're currently already in the appropriate turn order because I'm leading on cities, so we go right to buy power plants. So I get to pick the first power plant that's going to go up for auction. Alright Jason, I picked number 24, and I'm going to bid 24 on that.
I am going to go 25.
Okay, you can take that for 25.
Okay. So now I already have 4 power plants, so I actually have to get rid of the one.
Note that you only can actually have 4 power plants in a 2-player game.
However, because I actually do have another garbage plant already, I can actually get rid of that one and place the garbage I had on it into the new plant.
The plant that he's discarding is actually then removed from game. We now draw a new plant to replenish. So now I get to choose the next plant that goes up for auction. I think we're going to go with plant 20 though, for 20. Because I also actually have 4 power plants, I actually have to choose one to discard. And I'm going to just discard plant number 6 here, which actually means I lose the garbage that was actually attributed to it. And that plant is now removed from game. Now we go on to the buy raw materials step. So because Jason is the trailing player, he actually gets to pick next.
In this case, I don't actually have to purchase any additional resources because I've kind of been stockpiling it. However, I think it's probably a good idea to sort of continue that. So in this instance, I'm actually going to buy a little bit of coal, I think, for my number 25 plant. So I'm going to buy 2 coal, which is going to cost 3 for each, which is a total of 6. It's now Ken's turn to buy resources.
Well, Jason also has sort of picked the resource that I'm clearly going to be buying next. So that means that I have to pay a little bit more for it, but that's what you get for being up on top. I'm going to buy 1 coal for 3 and 2 coal for 4 apiece. That means I'm going to have to pay a total of 11. We now go on to the building phase. Jason, because he's the trailing player, is actually going to be the first person building.
So first of all, I'm going to build into Erfurt, which is going to cost me 13 plus 10 for a total of 23. Then I'm going to build into Hal for 6 plus 10, which is 16. And finally I'm going to build into Wilhelmshaven, which is going to cost me 14 plus 10 for a total of 24. Now it's Ken's turn.
Well, there's currently only one location I can actually build into right now, which is Leipzig. However, in order to build over there, I'm actually going to have to pay some pretty heavy connection fees. It's one of those sort of issues where it's either build or die. It's going to cost me 19 to build over to here, 6 to build into Hale, and then 3 to connect to Leipzig from there. So that's going to be a grand total of 25 to connect and 10 for the actual location, which also puts me at 10. That's it for the building phase, and then we go on to the bureaucracy phase. So because we are actually at 10 now, we are actually going to be going into step 2. First off, because I will note actually, there's actually still a power plant here that costs 9. Because of the minimum rule, we were actually supposed to remove this from the game as soon as we exceeded the 9 mark, so when Jason bought his 10th location. So we're going to remove that now. That is then immediately replaced with a plant 19, which goes over here. So, because we've hit step 2, first, the lowest cost plant is removed from the game. So it just happens to be the plant we just drew up. That is then replaced by another plant. Now, as part of the bureaucracy phase, we have to first fire our plants and get our money, and then we're going to be doing another thing with the power plants. So I guess I'll start with firing plants. I can fire 3, 4, 5, 10 plants, which is exactly what I have. 10 plants will give me 105 electros. It's now Jason's turn.
Technically I can fire 12 power stations at this point. However, I don't actually have 12. So I'm going to fire all of my plants except for plant 12, which will give me a total of 10. That's what I actually have. So all those resources go away. And that also gets me 105. So.
After we fired our plants and we get our money, because we're still in step 2, we actually have to remove the highest power plant from the market, place it underneath the deck, and draw a new power plant to replace it. Because we're also in step 2, that means from now on we're actually going to be able to buy into the 15-point slots, which is going to be good for the next building phase. We now go on from there.
So, Power Grid, what do you think, Ken?
Well, Power Grid is actually one of my favorite economy-style games. It's a really fun game. I find that the auction mechanic is actually really cool. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of psychology in there. There is a whole lot of intrigue between the different players and such.
There's a lot of strategy.
Yeah, like who wants what sort of thing. And the turn order mechanic I think is really interesting. The way they actually the leading player is actually differentiated from the trailing player, and that's actually a turn order thing in many ways. But I do have some beefs with this game. First off, the turn order mechanic. This is something that is actually really, really hard to teach to new players. It's not really a hard concept once you actually get it down. It's getting it down that's the problem, though. Just because, and don't get me wrong, it's a good mechanic. It's actually very, very good because your turn order is then based on how good you're doing versus how bad you're doing. And that, I think, is actually a really good thing, rather than the arbitrary system of where you decide to sit down today.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But it's still kind of difficult to actually teach to new players, and because of that, it's a little one of those things where it's almost like a necessary evil, but how necessary was it? Alright, to the power of pi, and fuse is locked. Alright, cool. Jason, we're all good to go. The power's back on.
Well, that's good to hear. I'm really excited about this game, Power Grid.
Yeah, me too.
Just something I'm a little confused on, like, what's the turn order? Who's playing when?
What's actually second player? Who is actually the leading player?
I'm asking you, like, who is the leading player?
Yeah, who's the leading player? That's right, yeah.
No, I'm asking you, what's his name?
No, what is the name of the second player? Who is the leading player?
I'm asking you these things.
No, I know, and I'm telling you that what is the name of the second player and who is the name of the first?
But I don't know.
No, I don't know his third player, Jason. I don't know his the trailing player.
I don't understand what you're saying. What is the name of the first player?
No, what is the name of the second player?
We're not talking about the second player, we're talking about the first player. Who is the first player?
Yeah, who's the first player? That's right. You got it.
But I still don't know. I don't know.
No. I don't know is the third player.
You know what? Let's just get back to the review.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. That's good. And it seems that Mr. Freeze actually likes to do this in a lot of his games. He likes to play around with player mechanics and turn order such.
Yeah. And, you know, for my part, I also really like this game. You know, it is one of my favorite games. But, you know, there are some issues. Foremost in my mind is the fact that the balancing with a different number of players, it just seems very unnecessary.
Yeah, and sometimes...
well, I mean, at its core, the game is pretty simple, but there are just so many exceptions. Like, you know, okay, this is how you do this, but if you have this many players, then it works this way. If you have this many players, it works that way. It just seems a little unnecessary, and it's, you know, more complex than it really needs to be.
Mm-hmm. And it is kind of nice, and again, this kind of falls back to like the turn order mechanic as well. It's nice that the game actually sort of takes into account the different level of players, so it's not the same thing, and it's nice to have that balancing thing. But let's say in a two-player game, I've played my fair share of two-player games of this before. They're not really that fun. Like Power Grid, I think, is at its prime between 4 and 5 players, and I kind of feel that's where it's designed to be. Mm-hmm. But it just doesn't seem right at 2 players. And I mean, people may disagree with me. I'm not saying that like you'd be wrong otherwise. I'm just saying that in my personal experience, I find the 2-player games to be kind of boring.
Well, I can't really speak to that. I haven't played a whole lot of 2-player games. Actually, I think the one that we did for this video was probably about my first. But I have played a lot of 6-player games at the other end of the spectrum, and you know, there you kind of run into sort of the opposite problem. Mm-hmm. Especially with certain players, they can kind of get into analysis paralysis.
Ah, that is big in this.
And there are a couple of people in our group that, you know, they like to spend a lot of time thinking about things. And, you know, as soon as it comes to their turn, you might as well just, you know, go get yourself some lunch and kind of just wait it out. And you know, plus with 6 players, I find the board's a little cramped.
This is true too, yeah.
So, you know, that gets to be a bit of an issue too. It just kind of drags on a little bit longer than it needs to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. I also find in Power Grid, and this is sort of unfortunate, but it seems like the person who is winning at the beginning of the first turn or the first few anyway, seems to usually be the person that wins the game, and it's kind of interesting that it creates this like snowballing effect where it's like if you're on top, you're pretty much always on top, but it's almost like if you screw up at any point, like you're kind of out almost immediately.
Well, yeah, and that's another thing too. I mean, I've seen games, and you know, it's mostly with newcomers, you know, who don't really know the game too well. But if you make even one mistake, you know, and it's a resource management game, so you have to manage your resources. But if you miscalculate and you know don't anticipate something, then you can end up in a situation where you just don't have money, you can't get it, and you're just basically out of the game.
Or at the very least, you're paralyzed for money compared to the other players.
Well, yeah, so there's no real way for you to win at that point, which, you know, I think it's, again, a balancing issue, and, you know, I think that could have been addressed better.
Mm-hmm. I think in one of these, in some ways, I think that this may have actually been a reflection of why they did the turn order mechanic the way they did. Mm-hmm. I don't know which came first, and I know that actually Friedman Freeze actually does like to play around with turn order in his games. But it almost kind of seems like at some point down the line in playtesting, they kind of saw like, oh wow, if you could make a mistake, you could actually be screwed for the rest of the game. Let's do this thing with turn order mechanics and make sure that the person who's losing actually has a better chance at everything. Which is a good idea. But it almost just kind of seems like it's just not enough. I mean, I would hate to play this game if you didn't actually have the leading and trailing player mechanics, though.
Well, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it really does kind of help with the game, but it does have little flaws around the edges there.
Absolutely.
Again, I mean, we're putting a lot of negativity on here, but we're trying to give this game a little bit of criticism because it's a very popular game.
It is.
But people need to know a little bit more of what are on the downsides, because I mean, everybody's talking about the upsides because it's a good game. It really is. Like I said, easily one of my favorite economy style games, but definitely not my favorite resource management game. All right, Power Grid. What do you think, Jason?
Personally, I'm going to give this game 4 out of 5. Mm-hmm. You know, it doesn't quite get to the 5 in my books, but it's still a great game. I do really enjoy it. I like to break it out every now and then, and you know, it has its problems, but many games do too.
For sure. I'm going to have to agree with Jason on this one. 4 out of 5. Power Grid is a solid game. If you like resource management games or you like economic games, this is a fantastic game. Whenever someone tries to ask me, how does Power Grid play? I usually say, it's like Monopoly, except fun.
Yeah. So that gives us a grand total of 8 meeples.
Which is pretty good overall, I'd have to say. Alright, so next time you're going to have to join us for a very special episode of Two Guys and Some Cardboard. It's going to be one of the last ones of the season, actually. And it's a game I've been actually looking forward to for quite some time. How about you, Jason?
Oh, yeah, it totally is. Anyway, so join us next time and have good games.